The ambulance's engine died at the worst possible moment, right in the middle of Montana's busiest intersection with a billionaire's life hanging by a thread inside. Jack Miller had exactly 30 seconds to make a choice that would cost him everything he'd worked for, yet save a life that would transform his own in ways he could never imagine. This is the story of how one mechanic's split-second decision to help a stranger led to his firing his family's near destruction and ultimately his rise to lead a statewide movement. Stay with me until the end and drop a comment about which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this incredible story travels. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Peterson's auto repair painting, golden stripes through the garage bay, where Jack Miller had already been working for 2 hours. His calloused hands moved with practiced precision over the engine of Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick, the same car he'd been fixing since his father ran this shop 15 years ago. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal filled his nostrils, a scent that had become as much a part of him as the grease permanently etched into the lines of his palms. "Dad, you forgot your lunch again." Emily's voice rang out from the shop's entrance, her 12-year-old frame silhouetted against the morning light. She held up a brown paper bag, the corners already showing spots where the peanut butter had soaked through. Jack looked up from under the hood, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a fresh streak of oil across his skin. "What would I do without you, kiddo? Starve, probably." Emily grinned, her mother's smile lighting up her face in a way that still made Jack's heart ache 3 years after Sarah's passing. "Or live on vending machine coffee and whatever that thing is you call breakfast." "Hey, beef jerky is a perfectly acceptable breakfast food," Jack protested, moving to ruffle his daughter's carefully braided hair before she ducked away. "Mom would have said otherwise," Emily said softly, and for a moment the garage fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic from Main Street. Jack's expression softened. "Yeah, she would have. She'd have made those blueberry pancakes you loved with extra syrup pooling in every square. The ones that looked like tiny swimming pools," Emily added, her voice carrying that particular mix of sadness and warmth that colored all their memories of Sarah. The moment was broken by the sharp voice of Dave Morgan, the shop's owner, cutting through the garage. "Miller, that Buick better be ready by noon. Mrs. Henderson's been calling every hour since yesterday." Dave Morgan was the kind of man who measured success in dollars per minute, his thick fingers constantly dancing over his phone's calculator app, tallying profits and losses with the dedication of a Wall Street trader trapped in a small-town body. He'd bought the shop from Jack's father's estate 5 years ago, promising to keep Jack on to honor the legacy. But promises Jack had learned meant little when balanced against profit margins. "It'll be ready, Dave," Jack called back, already returning to the engine. "Just need to replace the alternator belt and—" The sound that interrupted him wasn't unusual for a busy Montana morning, the wail of an ambulance siren cutting through the air. But what followed was the sudden violent cough of an engine dyeing the screech of tires, and then silence. Jack's head snapped up. Through the grimy garage window he could see the ambulance, its emergency lights still flashing, but now motionless at the intersection just 50 yards away. Cars were already beginning to honk their drivers, oblivious to the crisis unfolding inside the medical vehicle. "Not our problem," Dave said immediately, following Jack's gaze. "We've got 3 cars backed up waiting for service." But Jack was already moving his feet, carrying him toward the door, before his mind had fully processed the decision. His father's old socket wrench set, the one passed down through 3 generations of Miller mechanics, sat heavy in his tool belt. "Miller, don't you dare!" Dave's voice was sharp, threatening. "There's someone dying in there, Dave," Jack said, his hand on the door. "Someone's father, mother, someone's everything. You walk out that door during work hours, you're done. You hear me? Done." Emily stood frozen between them, her lunch bag still clutched in her hands, eyes wide with the kind of fear that comes from sensing your world about to shift on its axis. Jack looked at his daughter, then at the ambulance where the EMT was now frantically trying to flag down help, then back at Dave's red face. "Then I'm done," he said quietly, and pushed through the door. The morning air hit him like a physical force after the garage's closeness. Jack's work boots pounded against the asphalt as he sprinted toward the ambulance, dodging between honking cars. His mind was already running diagnostics the way the engine had died suggested fuel system failure, but the attempted restart he could hear meant the battery was good. Thank God. The EMT, a young woman with panic in her eyes, practically sobbed when she saw him approaching. Are you a mechanic? Please, we've got a critical patient. She coded twice already. The hospital's 5 minutes away, but we can't be... Pop the hood, Jack commanded, already pulling out his tools. Through the ambulance's back windows, he could glimpse another EMT working frantically over a patient compression after compression. The engine compartment told its story in seconds. Fuel pump relay, he'd seen this failure a dozen times in vehicles this age. His hands moved without conscious thought, years of experience guiding them. Bypass the faulty relay, create a direct connection. Pray the pump itself wasn't completely shot. How long get? The EMT asked. 40 seconds, so Jack muttered, not looking up. Around them, the intersection had become a chaos of horns and shouts. Someone was yelling about calling another ambulance. Someone else was screaming about being late for work. Jack's world narrowed to the engine, to the connections under his fingers. Sarah had always said he could speak to machines, could hear what they needed. It's like you're having a conversation with them. She'd laughed, watching him work late into the night to help a neighbor whose car had died. The memory fueled his movements. 30 seconds. Please, the EMT whispered. She's important. Everyone's important. Jack cut her off, making the final connection. Try it now. The engine roared to life. The EMT didn't waste time on thanks, just jumped into the driver's seat and peeled out, siren wailing anew. Jack stood in the middle of the intersection, tools still in his hands, watching the ambulance disappear toward Montana General. That's when he noticed the crowd. People had their phones out recording. Some were applauding. Old Mr. Chen from the Chinese restaurant was nodding approvingly. But Jack's eyes found only Emily standing in the doorway of the shop, tears streaming down her face, tears of pride or fear he couldn't tell. Dave Morgan stood beside her, his face purple with rage. The walk back to the shop felt longer than the sprint out. Each step carried the weight of what he'd just done, what it would cost. Emily ran to him as he approached, throwing her arms around his waist. That was amazing, Dad. You saved someone. Yeah, kiddo, Jack said softly, his hand on her head. I did. Dave didn't let him pass the threshold. Your tools. Get your personal tools and get out. You're done here, Miller. 20 years of service and you throw it away for some stranger. Dave, come on, Jack started. It was an emergency. I don't care if it was the president himself in that ambulance. You walked out during work hours after I explicitly told you not to. You think you're some kind of hero? Heroes don't pay bills. Heroes don't keep shops running. Get your stuff and get out. The other mechanics in the shop had stopped working, watching the scene unfold. Tommy, who Jack had trained from a kid fresh out of high school, looked like he wanted to speak up, but didn't dare. Marcus, the older mechanic who'd worked with Jack's father, just shook his head sadly. Jack moved through the shop with deliberate calm, collecting his personal tools. The socket set his grandfather had bought in 1952. The torque wrench Sarah had given him for their 5th anniversary. The small framed photo of the three of them at Emily's 9th birthday party, Sarah already thin from the cancer, but smiling bright as the sun. This is wrong, Mr. Morgan, Emily said suddenly, her young voice cutting through the tension. My dad saved someone's life. That matters more than some stupid rule. Emily, Jack warned gently. No, Dad, Mom always said doing the right thing isn't supposed to be easy. That's what makes it right. Dave's laugh was harsh. Your mom's not here to pay your bills, kid. Your dad just threw away a steady paycheck for a stranger who'll never even know his name. That's not heroic, it's stupid. Jack's hands clenched around his toolbox, but he kept his voice level. We'll be fine, Emily. Come on. They walked out together, Emily's hand in his, her small fingers squeezing tight. The morning sun was higher now, beating down on the empty spot where Jack's old truck sat in the employee section of the parking lot. What are we going to do, Dad? Emily asked once they were in the truck, her earlier bravado cracking to reveal the frightened 12-year-old beneath. Jack started the engine. It caught on the first try because he'd maintained it religiously. We're going to go home, make some lunch, figure it out from there. But the rent's due next week, and my school fees, and... Hey, Jack said softly, reaching over to squeeze her shoulder. We've been through worse, haven't we? Emily nodded, but her eyes were full of doubt. They had been through worse. Sarah's death had been the worst, but they'd had Jack's steady income to keep them afloat through that storm. Now what did they have? The drive home was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Jack's mind was already running calculations. They had maybe 2 weeks of savings. His truck was paid off, but it was old. The house was a rental. Emily's school was important. She was brilliant, especially in science and math, just like her mother. He couldn't let this affect her education. Their small house on Maple Street looked even smaller in the harsh morning light. Paint peeling on the shutters he'd been meaning to fix. Grass a little too long in the front yard. But it was home, the place where Emily's height marks climbed the kitchen doorframe, where Sarah's garden still bloomed with the perennials she'd planted that last spring. I'll make lunch, Emily offered as they went inside. Grilled cheese. Sounds perfect, kiddo. While Emily worked in the kitchen, Jack sat at the dining table, the same one where he and Sarah had spent countless evenings helping Emily with homework, playing board games, planning their future. Now it was covered with bills, electric, water, rent, Emily's school. The numbers didn't change no matter how many times he looked at them. His phone buzzed. Tommy from the shop. That was BS, man. Dave's wrong. You did the right thing. Then Marcus, your dad would be proud, Jack. If you need a reference, you got it. Mrs. Henderson. Heard what happened, dear. Don't you worry about the car. Heroes don't always wear capes. But kind words didn't pay bills. Emily set a plate in front of him, grilled cheese cut diagonally, just how he liked it, with a pickle on the side. She'd made one for herself too, and they ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. I could get a job, Emily said suddenly. The grocery store hires... Absolutely not. You're 12. Your job is school. But Dad? No buts. I'll figure this out. I always do. The afternoon was spent on the phone. Every shop in town seemed to already know what had happened. News traveled fast in a place like Millfield, Montana, population 8,000 on a good day. Sorry, Jack, I've got a full crew, said Peterson from the shop across town. Times are tough. Nothing available right now. From Rodriguez Auto. Dave Morgan's already been calling around, says you're unreliable. Sorry, man, from Jim at the dealership. By evening, Jack had exhausted every option in town. He'd have to look further out, maybe Billings, but that was an hour's drive each way. The gas alone would eat into any paycheck. Emily was at the kitchen table doing homework when the doorbell rang. Jack found Nancy Miller no relation despite the name from the Millfield Gazette standing on his porch. Nancy was in her 60s, had been running the local paper since before Jack was born, and had a nose for stories that mattered. Jack Miller, the hero of Main Street, she said with a wry smile. Mind if I come in? I'm no hero, Nancy, just unemployed. That's exactly why I'm here. People need to know what happened today. Really happened. Jack hesitated, then stepped aside. Nancy had always been fair, had written a beautiful piece about Sarah when she passed. They sat in the living room, Emily hovering in the doorway, until Jack waved her in. Nancy pulled out an old-fashioned recorder and a notebook. Tell me about this morning, from the beginning. So Jack did. He told her about Mrs. Henderson's Buick, about Emily bringing lunch, about the ambulance, and Dave's ultimatum, and the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Why, Nancy asked simply, why risk everything for a stranger? Jack was quiet for a long moment, his eyes finding the photo on the mantel, his wedding picture Sarah radiant in white lace. My wife died 3 years ago, he said slowly. Cancer. Towards the end, there was this night. She was in so much pain, could barely breathe. The ambulance came, and there was this EMT. This kid really couldn't have been more than 22. He held her hand the whole way to the hospital, talked to her about everything, and nothing kept her calm when I was falling apart. I don't even know his name, but he gave us 3 more days. 3 days to say goodbye properly. Emily had moved to sit beside him, her head against his shoulder. When I saw that ambulance today, Jack continued, all I could think was that someone in there was running out of time. Maybe someone was waiting for them, needing those extra minutes, those goodbyes. How could I not help? Nancy wrote steadily, her shorthand filling pages. And now Dave Morgan's blacklisting you all over town. Now I figure it out. I always do. What about you, Emily? Nancy asked gently. How do you feel about what your dad did? Emily straightened. My mom used to say that integrity is doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. Dad showed integrity today. I'm proud of him. We'll be okay because we have each other and that's what matters. Nancy smiled. Sarah's daughter through and through. Jack, there's something else. I've been doing some digging. The patient in that ambulance, my sources at the hospital are being very tight-lipped, but there's talk. It was someone important, someone very important. Doesn't matter who it was, Jack said firmly. I'd have done the same for anyone. I know you would have. That's what makes this a story worth telling. After Nancy left, promising the story would run in tomorrow's edition, Jack and Emily settled into their evening routine. Homework check dishes, a chapter from the book they were reading together, To Kill a Mockingbird. Emily's choice for her English class. Dad, Emily said, as he tucked her in a ritual she claimed she was too old for but never refused. What Scout's dad says about courage, about knowing you're licked before you begin. But beginning anyway. That's what you did today, isn't it? Maybe so, kiddo, maybe so. Mom would be proud. I hope so. Jack sat on the edge of her bed for a moment longer, studying his daughter's face in the soft light of her bedside lamp. She had Sarah's delicate features, but his stubborn chin, Sarah's brilliant mind, but his steady hands. Whatever came next, he had to make sure she was okay. Later, alone in the kitchen with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands, Jack allowed himself to feel the full weight of the day. 20 years at that shop. 20 years of loyal service, of coming in early and staying late, of fixing problems no one else could solve. Gone in an instant. But he kept coming back to the ambulance, to the EMT's desperate eyes, to the sound of that engine roaring back to life. Someone was alive tonight because of what he'd done. Someone's story continued. How could he regret that his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number? Mr. Miller, my name is James Richardson. I'm the administrator at Montana General. The patient you helped save today is stable. She wanted me to find out who you were. Can we meet tomorrow? Jack stared at the message for a long moment. He typed back, I'm glad she's okay. That's all that matters. Please, Mr. Miller, she insists. Jack hesitated, then, I can come by in the morning. He put the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the street where a few cars passed in the evening quiet. Somewhere in Montana General, someone was breathing because he'd made a choice. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Bills would still need paying. Emily would still need her school fees covered, and he'd still need to find work. But tonight, someone was alive. The next morning came too soon and not soon enough. Jack had barely slept, his mind running through job possibilities, budget calculations, and the strange text from the hospital. Emily was already up when he came downstairs scrambling eggs with the focused concentration she brought to everything. Hospital, she asked, having seen the text the night before. Just a quick visit. Want to come? School. Remember that thing you insist is my only job? He smiled despite everything. Right. Mrs. Chen is picking you up. Yeah, her and Lily have been great since... Emily trailed off. Since Mom died. The words hung unspoken, but understood. After dropping Emily at school, watching her disappear into the building with her backpack bouncing, Jack drove to Montana General. The hospital sprawled across several blocks, its newest wing gleaming with glass and steel, a stark contrast to the older brick buildings. James Richardson met him in the lobby. He was younger than Jack expected, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of tired eyes that came from dealing with life and death decisions daily. Mr. Miller, thank you for coming. Before we go up, I need to tell you something about the patient you saved yesterday. I don't need to know. Actually, you do. Her name is Catherine Reynolds. The name hit Jack like a physical force. Catherine Reynolds. Everyone in Montana knew that name. The Reynolds Foundation had built half the hospitals in the state-funded schools, supported everything from food banks to college scholarships. Catherine Reynolds was old Montana money turned into new Montana philanthropy. I had no idea, Jack stammered. She wants to meet you. She's quite insistent, and trust me when Catherine Reynolds insists on something, it happens. They rode the elevator to the top floor, the VIP wing, Jack realized. The hallway was quiet, carpeted. Nothing like the chaos of the emergency room he'd brought Emily to when she broke her arm 2 years ago. Richardson knocked on a door, then opened it. "Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Miller is here." The room was more like a luxury hotel suite than a hospital room, but Jack's attention was immediately drawn to the woman in the bed. Catherine Reynolds was in her 70s, her silver hair perfectly arranged despite having nearly died yesterday, her blue eyes sharp and assessing. "So you're the mechanic who saved my life," she said, her voice strong despite the oxygen cannula. "Come in. Don't hover in the doorway like a delivery man." Jack entered uncomfortably aware of his work boots on the pristine floor, his calloused hands that seemed too rough for this elegant space. "Ma'am, I just did what anyone would have—" "Stop right there," Catherine interrupted. "I've been hearing about what happened after you saved me. David Morgan fired you. You have a daughter to support, and yet you didn't hesitate. That's not what anyone would do, Mr. Miller. That's what the right person would do." She gestured to a chair beside her bed. "Sit. Tell me about yourself. James here has been doing research, but I prefer to hear things firsthand." For the next hour, Jack found himself telling his story to one of the richest women in Montana. About growing up in his father's shop, about meeting Sarah in high school, about Emily and her brilliant mind, about Sarah's death, and the struggle since. Catherine listened with an intensity that made him feel like he was the only person in the world. "Your daughter, she's 12, Catherine asked. "Yes, ma'am. 12 going on 30 sometimes. She's got her mother's brains and her stubbornness." Catherine smiled. "Good combination." "Mr. Miller, I'm going to be blunt. I owe you my life. But more than that, I've seen your character. In 60 years of business and philanthropy, I've learned to read people quickly. You're the kind of person I want in my organization." "I don't understand." "The Reynolds Foundation maintains a fleet of over 70 vehicles. Mobile medical units, food bank trucks, transportation for elderly services. We currently outsource maintenance to various shops, and frankly, it's been a disaster. I want to bring it in-house. I need someone to run it, someone who understands that every vehicle matters because every vehicle serves people who need help." Jack's mouth went dry. "Mrs. Reynolds, I appreciate the offer, but I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about running a large operation like that." "You knew enough to save my life in 40 seconds. You knew enough to choose helping someone over your own job security. That tells me everything I need to know about your capabilities." She paused, studying him. "The salary would be $90,000 to start full benefits, and we have an excellent education fund for employees' children." $90,000. More than double what he'd been making at Dave's shop. Emily's college would be secure. They could maybe even buy a house instead of renting. "I need to think about it," Jack heard himself say. Catherine's laugh was rich and genuine. "Of course you do. You're not impulsive except when it comes to saving lives. Take your time, Mr. Miller, but not too much time. I'm old, but I'm impatient." As Jack left the hospital, his head was spinning. The morning had taken such an unexpected turn that he felt disconnected from reality. His phone was buzzing with messages. Nancy's article had hit the Gazette's website, and apparently it was spreading fast. He picked up Emily from school, her face bright with excitement. "Dad, everyone's talking about you. Lily's mom said you're a hero, and Mr. Patterson, my science teacher, used you as an example of applied physics in action. Something about electrical bypass and current flow." "It wasn't that complicated, kiddo. And Mrs. Chen says the whole Chinese community is talking about it. Her uncle owns a restaurant in Billings and wants to offer you a job fixing his delivery trucks." They drove home through streets that suddenly seemed different. People waved from sidewalks. Mrs. Henderson was on their porch with a casserole. The Johnsons from 2 doors down had mowed their lawn. "What's happening?" Emily whispered. "I think," Jack said slowly, "people are being neighbors." The evening brought more surprises. Father Martinez from the church Sarah had attended stopped by with a check from the emergency fund. "For times of unexpected hardship," he said, refusing Jack's attempts to refuse. The youth baseball team Jack had coached 2 summers ago organized a car wash fundraiser for the weekend. But it was the last visitor of the evening who surprised Jack the most. Dave Morgan stood on his porch looking uncomfortable and older than Jack remembered. "Jack," he said, not quite meeting his eyes, "I came to... The thing is, I've been getting calls all day. Customers saying they're taking their business elsewhere if I don't hire you back. Mrs. Henderson, the Chens, half the Main Street businesses. Dave, I'm offering you your job back, with a raise, 5%. 2 days ago, Jack would have jumped at the offer. Now thinking of Catherine Reynolds and her fleet of vehicles that served the community, thinking of Emily's face when he'd walked away from the ambulance, thinking of Sarah and what she would say, he knew his answer. Thanks, Dave, but no. I appreciate the offer, but I think it's time for something new. Dave's face flushed. You think you're too good for my shop now because of one lucky morning. No, Dave, I think I remembered who I want to be, the kind of man my daughter can be proud of, the kind my wife believed I was. After Dave left muttering about ingratitude, Jack sat with Emily on their small front porch, watching the stars emerge in the Montana sky. Dad, what are we going to do? We're going to take a leap, kiddo, a big one. He told her about Catherine Reynolds, about the job offer, about the possibility of running an entire fleet operation. Emily listened with growing excitement. That's amazing. You'd be helping so many people. The mobile medical units alone, Mom would have loved that. You think I should take it? I think, Emily said carefully, that yesterday you showed me that doing the right thing is more important than doing the safe thing. This feels like the right thing. The next morning, Jack called James Richardson and accepted the position. Catherine wanted him to start immediately, but Jack negotiated for a week to wrap up his life as a small-town mechanic and prepare for whatever came next. The week flew by in a blur of preparations and goodbye visits to longtime customers. Mrs. Henderson cried when he stopped by to finish fixing her Buick, refusing payment. You've been keeping this old car running since your father's time. It's the least I can do. Tommy and Marcus from Dave's shop stopped by the house one evening with a bottle of whiskey and stories about Jack's father. He'd be proud, Marcus said. You stood up for what mattered. The night before starting his new job, Jack stood in Emily's doorway, watching her sleep. She'd fallen asleep with her science textbook open, working on a project about emergency medical response times. He thought about the ambulance, about those 40 seconds that had changed everything. Sarah had always said that life pivoted on moments, single decisions that rippled outward in ways you could never predict. She'd been talking about her choice to say yes when he'd asked her to dance at the high school gymnasium, both of them 17, and terrified and hopeful. Now at 38, standing in a house that might not be theirs much longer if this new job didn't work out. Jack understood what she meant. One moment, one choice, one ambulance at an intersection, and the entire trajectory of their lives had shifted. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Reynolds. Tomorrow begins something remarkable, Mr. Miller. Rest well. Jack smiled, thinking of Sarah, of Emily, of the socket wrench set that had been passed down through generations and had helped save a life. Tomorrow would bring challenges he couldn't imagine, but tonight he was exactly where he needed to be. The first day at the Reynolds Foundation headquarters felt like stepping into another world. The building itself was a testament to Catherine Reynolds' vision. Solar panels on the roof, a community garden in the front, and a steady stream of people coming and going, each with a purpose. James Richardson gave him the tour, introducing him to staff members who all seemed to know his story. The garage facility was impressive, 3 bays, state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, and a fleet of vehicles that ranged from modified vans serving as mobile medical units to refrigerated trucks for the food bank. This is your domain, Richardson said. Mrs. Reynolds wants a full assessment within 2 weeks and a 5-year plan within a month. That's ambitious. That's Catherine Reynolds. She doesn't do anything halfway. Jack spent the morning going through each vehicle, making notes, identifying problems that had been patched rather than properly fixed. By lunch, he had a list 3 pages long of immediate needs. How bad is it? Richardson asked when they met in the cafeteria, which Jack learned served free meals to both employees and anyone from the community who needed one. It's fixable, Jack said, but it's been neglected. These vehicles are literally lifelines for people, and they're being held together with temporary fixes and prayer. What do you need? Time parts, and at least 2 more mechanics. Submit a proposal. Catherine already approved a preliminary budget that would probably surprise you. That afternoon, Jack was under one of the mobile medical units when he heard a familiar voice. I knew you'd be under a vehicle. Some things never change. He rolled out to find Catherine Reynolds standing there looking remarkably healthy for someone who'd nearly died a week ago. She was using a walker, but standing strong. "Mrs. Reynolds, should you be—" "I'm fine. My doctors are overly cautious. Show me what you've found." For the next hour, Jack walked her through his discoveries, explaining not just the mechanical issues, but what they meant for the people who depended on these vehicles. A faulty refrigeration unit meant food might spoil before reaching the reservation. An unreliable engine in a medical unit could mean the difference between life and death. Catherine listened intently, asking pointed questions that showed she understood more about mechanics than he'd expected. "How long to get everything operational?" she asked. "To properly fix everything, 3 months if I have the right team. And to make it exceptional, to create a fleet operation that could be a model for other foundations." Jack thought about it. "Give me 6 months and the right people, and I'll give you the best-maintained fleet in the state." Catherine smiled. "I knew I chose the right person. Do it." As she turned to leave, she paused. "Your daughter Emily, bring her by sometime. I hear she's interested in science and engineering. She'd love that." "Good. We're starting a new STEM program for middle school students. I think she'd be perfect for our pilot group." That evening, Jack came home to find Emily had cooked dinner spaghetti with sauce from scratch Sarah's recipe. "How was it?" she asked eagerly. Jack told her everything, watching her eyes light up at the description of the facilities, the mission, the possibility of the STEM program. "It sounds amazing, Dad. You're going to help so many people." "We are, kiddo. This is our chance to do something that matters." The weeks that followed transformed Jack's life into something he barely recognized. Each morning he woke before dawn, not from the anxiety that had plagued him after losing his job at Dave's shop, but from genuine excitement about the day ahead. The Reynolds Foundation garage had become his second home, and slowly, methodically, he was turning chaos into order. "Mr. Miller, we have a problem." Sandra, the Foundation's logistics coordinator, burst into the garage on a Thursday morning 3 weeks into his new position. Her usually composed face was etched with worry. "The mobile medical unit heading to the Crow Reservation just broke down. They have 40 seniors waiting for their monthly checkups, some of them diabetic needing their insulin." Jack was already moving, grabbing his emergency toolkit. "Where are they at?" "Route 89 about 30 miles north, but Jack, that's not the only problem. That unit has our only portable dialysis machine. Mrs. Crowfeather needs her treatment today, or she'll have to be hospitalized." The weight of real consequences of lives hanging in the balance hit Jack differently than it ever had before. This wasn't about getting Mrs. Henderson to her bridge game. This was life and death repeated daily across dozens of vehicles and hundreds of people. "I'm on my way. Call Tommy Martinez, tell him I'll pay him contractor rates to cover the garage while I'm gone." The drive north gave Jack time to think about how much had changed. He'd already hired one new mechanic, Carlos, a young veteran who'd learned his skills keeping military vehicles running in Afghanistan. But they needed more hands, more expertise. The Foundation's fleet was too large, too vital for a skeleton crew. He found the mobile medical unit on the shoulder of the highway, its hood-up steam still wisping from the engine compartment. Dr. Marcus Webb, the unit's regular physician, met him with relief evident in his eyes. "Thank God you're here. We've got patients waiting and Mrs. Crowfeather. If we can't get there in the next 2 hours, she'll have to miss her dialysis." Jack dove under the hood, his hands reading the engine like Braille. Blown head gasket, but worse, the cooling system had been patched so many times it was more sealant than original parts. This was exactly the kind of delayed maintenance he'd been finding throughout the fleet. "I can get you running," Jack said, already working, "but this unit needs to come off rotation after today for a complete overhaul." "We don't have a backup," Dr. Webb said quietly. "This is the only unit equipped for the reservation route." Jack's hands paused for just a moment. 1 unit, 40 seniors, critical medical equipment. The math was simple and terrible. "Then we make it work," he said, resuming his repairs with renewed urgency. It took him 90 minutes using every trick his father had taught him, every shortcut he'd learned in 20 years of keeping dying vehicles alive. When the engine finally turned over running rough, but running, Dr. Webb actually hugged him. "You don't understand what this means," the doctor said. "Mrs. Crowfeather is raising 3 grandchildren. If she misses dialysis, if she's hospitalized, there's no one else." Jack followed the medical unit to the reservation, making sure it arrived safely. The community center where the mobile clinic set up was already full of waiting patients. He watched Dr. Webb and his team spring into action, saw Mrs. Crow Feather's relief as she was connected to the dialysis machine, witnessed the careful choreography of medical care delivered to people who had no other access. "You saved us today," Dr. Webb said as Jack prepared to leave. "But what about next week, next month?" "Give me time," Jack said. "I'm working on something better." The drive back to Millfield gave him time to formulate a plan. By the time he pulled into the Foundation's garage, he knew what he needed to do. That evening, he presented his proposal to Catherine Reynolds in her office, a space that managed to be both elegant and warm, filled with photos of Foundation projects and the people they served. "We need a complete overhaul of how we approach fleet maintenance," Jack said, spreading his charts across her desk. "Not just fixing problems, but preventing them. Not just maintaining vehicles, but creating redundancy." Catherine studied his proposals, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "This is ambitious. You're talking about doubling our maintenance budget." "I'm talking about never having a senior citizen miss dialysis because of a blown gasket. I'm talking about food never spoiling because a refrigeration unit failed. I'm talking about making sure that when someone needs help, our vehicles can deliver it." "And the mobile maintenance unit?" Catherine asked, pointing to one of his sketches. "That's innovative. We go to the vehicles instead of always bringing them in. Preventive maintenance on site, especially for the units serving remote areas. We catch problems before they become emergencies." Catherine was quiet for a long moment, then smiled. "Do it. Submit the full budget to James. And Jack? This is exactly why I hired you. You don't just see machines, you see the people depending on them." As Jack left her office, his phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Dad, there's a man here at the house, says he knows you from the Air Force, Carlos something." Jack frowned. He'd hired Carlos just last week, and while the young man was a skilled mechanic, showing up at his house was crossing a line. He drove home quickly, finding Carlos sitting on his front porch with Emily, who was keeping a safe distance but had apparently deemed him harmless enough to offer lemonade. "Carlos, what are you doing here?" Jack asked, his tone careful but firm. The young veteran stood quickly, his military bearing evident. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, I didn't mean to overstep. It's just, I got a call from my old unit. 3 of my buddies are getting out next month. Good mechanics, all of them. They heard about what you're doing here, the Foundation's mission. They want in." Jack relaxed slightly. "You could have told me this at work." "I know, but..." Carlos hesitated, then pulled out his phone, showing Jack a photo. "This is why it matters. My daughter Sophia, she's Emily's age. She's the reason I wanted this job, stable hours, good benefits, work that means something. These guys, they're all in the same boat. Coming home trying to build something meaningful." Emily had moved closer, looking at the photo. "She's in my grade. She's in Mr. Patterson's advanced science class." "You're in advanced science?" Carlos asked Emily, his face lighting up. "Sophia struggles with it. Maybe you could study together sometime." Jack watched his daughter naturally take charge, suggesting study times and comparing teachers, and felt something shift. This wasn't just about him anymore. The ripples from that morning at the intersection were spreading, creating connections he hadn't anticipated. "Send me their resumes," Jack told Carlos. "If they're half as good as you, we'll find spots for them." After Carlos left, Emily helped Jack clear the dinner dishes, unusually quiet. "What are you thinking about kiddo?" Jack asked. "How everything connects," she said slowly. "You saved Mrs. Reynolds, and now you're running her fleet. Carlos needed a job, and now his daughter might have a study partner. It's like dropping a stone in water and watching the ripples spread." "Your mom used to say something similar," Jack said, his throat tight. "She said kindness was like compound interest, it just keeps growing." The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the garage. Dave Morgan stood in the bay doorway, his usual bluster replaced by something Jack had never seen before, humility. "I need to talk to you," Dave said. Jack set down his wrench, wiping his hands on a rag. "If you're here to cause trouble..." "I'm here because I'm losing everything," Dave interrupted. "Half my customers left. The ones who stayed are demanding lower prices. I had to let Tommy go yesterday. Marcus quit this morning." "I'm sorry to hear that, Dave, but..." "I'm selling the shop. The words came out in a rush. We're trying to, but nobody wants it. The reputation is shot. 20 years building that business, and I destroyed it in one morning. Jack wasn't sure what to say. Part of him felt vindicated, but a larger part, the part Sarah had always loved, felt sympathy for a man watching his life's work crumble. What do you want from me, Dave? I want to apologize, properly, and I want to ask if the foundation might consider buying the shop, converting it to a satellite maintenance facility. You'd need one anyway, right? For your expansion. Jack stared at him. Dave's shop was perfectly located, had 3 bays established vendor relationships. It would actually solve several of his logistics problems. That's not my decision alone, Jack said carefully. But I'll present it to Mrs. Reynolds. There's one more thing, Dave said, his voice dropping. I want to work for you, not as a manager, just as a mechanic. I'm 63, Jack. I don't want my last years in this business to be defined by the worst decision I ever made. The irony was so thick Jack could almost taste it. His former boss, the man who'd fired him for saving a life, now asking for a job. I'll think about it, Jack said. But Dave, if this happened, you'd be working under me, under Carlos, under whoever I hired. Could you handle that? Dave's nod was immediate. I just want to work, to do something that matters. I see what you're doing here, Jack. Your father would be proud. I should have been better. After Dave left, Jack found himself standing in the garage, surrounded by vehicles that served the community's most vulnerable. Each one represented dozens, sometimes hundreds of people, depending on them running properly. The responsibility was enormous, but so was the opportunity. Catherine Reynolds appeared in the doorway, having apparently been watching the exchange from her office window. That took courage, she said, from both of you. He fired me for saving your life, Jack reminded her. And now he's learning what that decision really cost him. Not just money or reputation, but the chance to be part of something meaningful. She moved into the garage, running her hand along one of the medical units. What do you think about his proposal? The shop would be valuable. Dave himself. Jack shrugged. Everyone deserves a second chance, I suppose. Your daughter would be proud of that sentiment. She would. So would her mother. Catherine smiled. Make it happen. But Jack, this is your division. Dave works for you, and if he can't handle that, he's gone. That afternoon, Jack called a meeting with his small but growing team. Carlos was there, along with the 2 new hires he'd brought on that week. He laid out his vision, not just a maintenance department, but a rapid response team, a training program for young mechanics, a model that other foundations could replicate. We're not just fixing vehicles, Jack said, thinking of Mrs. Crowfeather and her dialysis of the food bank trucks of the senior center shuttles. We're maintaining lifelines. Every bolt we tighten, every engine we tune affects real people, people who are counting on us. Carlos nodded enthusiastically. In Afghanistan, we called it mission-critical maintenance. Every vehicle down meant lives at risk. Exactly. So we're going to be the best fleet maintenance operation in the state. We're going to set the standard. That evening, Emily was waiting for him with news of her own. She'd been accepted into the Foundation's STEM program, but more than that, she'd been asked to help design a tracking system for the fleet vehicles. They want us to create an app, she said excitedly, showing him her preliminary sketches. Something that tracks maintenance schedules, alerts for problems, even routes optimization to save fuel. Jack looked at his 12-year-old daughter's design, seeing Sarah's brilliance shining through, mixed with a practical understanding that was purely Emily. This is incredible, kiddo. Sophia's working on it too, and 2 other kids from school. Mrs. Reynolds says if we can make it work, she'll implement it across the entire fleet. The doorbell interrupted them. Jack found Father Martinez on his porch again, but this time he wasn't alone. Several members of the church congregation stood behind him. Jack, we've been talking, Father Martinez said, about what you're doing at the Foundation, about second chances and redemption. We want to help. I don't understand. Dave Morgan has been coming to confession. What he did was wrong, but his repentance is genuine. The congregation wants to sponsor an apprenticeship program through the Foundation. Young people who've made mistakes, who need a second chance learning mechanics while serving the community. Mrs. Chen stepped forward. My nephew, the one who got in trouble last year, he needs direction purpose. This could save him. Jack thought about the growing fleet, the constant need for skilled hands. the possibility of turning the garage into something more than just a maintenance facility. "I'll talk to Mrs. Reynolds," he said. "But Father, this wouldn't be easy. These vehicles, the people depending on them, it's serious work." "Redemption never is easy," Father Martinez replied, "but it's always worth it." Later that night, Jack sat at his kitchen table surrounded by plans and proposals. The scope of what he was building had grown far beyond anything he'd imagined that morning at the intersection. It wasn't just about maintaining vehicles anymore. It was about creating opportunities, building community, offering second chances. His phone rang. It was Dr. Webb from the mobile medical unit. "Jack, I wanted you to know Mrs. Crow Feather completed her treatment today. She asked me to thank the mechanic who made sure we got there. She said her grandchildren want to meet you." "Just doing my job, Doc." "No, you're doing much more than that. You're keeping promises the foundation makes to vulnerable people. That's not just a job. That's a calling." After the call, Jack walked to Emily's room. She was asleep at her desk again, her laptop open to the fleet management app she was designing. He saved her work and closed the computer, then gently moved her to her bed. On her desk beside her homework was a photo from the Foundation's recent community day. Jack was in the background under a vehicle as always, but in the foreground were dozens of people, seniors from the center, families from the food bank, children from the after-school program. All of them connected to the work he did, even if they'd never know his name. He thought about Dave Morgan, about second chances and redemption, about Carlos and his fellow veterans looking for purpose after service, about the young people Father Martinez wanted to help, kids who needed direction and skills and hope. The next morning, Jack arrived at the garage to find Catherine Reynolds already there examining one of the newly repaired medical units with obvious satisfaction. 27 vehicles fully operational, she said without preamble. "That's up from 12 when you started, in less than a month." "We're just getting started," Jack replied. "With Dave's shop as a satellite location and the new hires Carlos is bringing in, we can double that in another month." "And the apprenticeship program Father Martinez proposed?" Jack shouldn't have been surprised. She already knew. Catherine Reynolds seemed to know everything that happened in Millfield. "I think it could work. Create a pipeline of trained mechanics while giving young people a chance to build careers." "Sarah would have loved this," Catherine said quietly, and Jack's breath caught. "I've been reading about her. Teacher volunteer advocate for second chances. You're building something she would have been proud of." "How did you—" "I make it my business to know the people who work for me, especially the ones running critical divisions. Your wife was remarkable, Jack. Emily is lucky to have her spirit, and you're honoring her memory in the best possible way by serving others." Before Jack could respond, an alarm went off on his phone. The fleet tracking system Emily and her team had beta tested was showing a refrigeration unit failure on one of the food bank trucks. "That's 30 miles out," Jack said, already moving. "If we don't get there fast, they'll lose everything. That's a week's worth of fresh produce for the homeless shelter." "Go," Catherine said simply. Jack grabbed his tools and ran for his truck, Carlos right behind him. As they drove, Carlos coordinated with the driver over the phone, walking them through temporary measures to slow the temperature rise. They arrived to find the truck on the side of the road, the driver frantically checking the failing unit. Jack dove in, diagnosed the problem, a failed compressor, and knew they couldn't fix it on site. "We need to transfer the load," Jack said. "Fast." "There's no other refrigerated truck available," Carlos said, checking his phone. Jack thought quickly, then called Dave Morgan. "Dave, you still have that refrigerated van you used for the fish market deliveries." "Yeah, but it's small. Let's bring it now. Highway 89-mile marker 47. While they waited, Jack and Carlos packed the produce in emergency insulation, using every trick to keep it cold. Dave arrived in 20 minutes, and together they transferred the most perishable items to his van. "This won't all fit," Dave said, sweat streaming down his face despite the cold. "Then we make multiple trips," Jack said. "Carlos, you drive the van to the shelter. Dave and I will pack what we can in my truck with ice from the gas station." It took 3 hours, multiple trips, and every ounce of ingenuity they had, but they saved the entire shipment. As they unloaded the last of the produce at the homeless shelter, the shelter director, Maria Santos, had tears in her eyes. "This feeds 40 people for a week," she said. 40 people who have nothing else. You don't understand what this means." "We're just doing our job," Jack said, But Maria shook her head. No, Dave Morgan fired you for doing the right thing. Now here you are working alongside him to help people who can't help themselves. That's not just a job, that's grace. Dave was quiet on the drive back, but as they reached the foundation, he spoke. I was wrong, Jack, not just about firing you, about everything, about what matters. I spent so many years counting dollars that I forgot to count the things that actually count. We all lose our way sometimes, Jack said, thinking of the dark days after Sarah's death, when he'd barely been able to get out of bed when only Emily's needs had kept him moving. Your wife would be proud, Dave said quietly, of what you're building here. It's what she always talked about, isn't it? Community, connection, taking care of each other. That evening, Jack came home to find Emily teaching Sophia and 3 other kids from her STEM program in their living room. They had papers spread everywhere, laptops open, the fleet management app projected on the TV. Dad, look, Emily said excitedly. We figured out how to predict maintenance needs based on usage patterns. We can prevent breakdowns before they happen. Sophia added, my dad says this could work for other organizations too. We could help foundations everywhere keep their vehicles running. Jack looked at these 12-year-olds planning to change the world from his living room and felt a surge of hope so strong it almost hurt. This was what Sarah had always believed in the next generation, taking what they were given and making it better. You know what this needs, Jack said. Real-world testing. How about you all come to the garage Saturday? See how your app works with actual vehicles. The kids erupted in excitement, already making plans. As they worked, Jack stepped onto the porch, needing a moment to process everything. The street was quiet normal. No one passing by would know that inside this small house, kids were designing systems that could help thousands. No one would know that a fired mechanic was building something revolutionary at the Reynolds Foundation. No one would know that second chances were blooming all over Millfield like Sarah's perennials in the garden. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Reynolds. The board approved your full proposal. The apprenticeship program, the satellite shop, the mobile maintenance units. All of it. You're not just maintaining our fleet anymore, Jack. You're building a model for community service that will outlive us all. Jack thought about that morning at the intersection, the split-second decision that had cost him everything and given him even more. He thought about the ripples Emily had described spreading outward in ways no one could predict. Another text, this one from Dr. Webb. Mrs. Crowfeather's grandchildren made you something. They want to deliver it personally tomorrow. Then Carlos, my 3 buddies are in, they'll be here Monday, we're going to need more coffee. And finally, Emily calling from inside, Dad, we need your input on the maintenance schedule algorithm. Jack smiled, pocketing his phone. Inside his daughter was changing the world. Tomorrow he'd meet the grandchildren of a woman whose life depended on his work. Monday he'd welcome more veterans looking for purpose. And somewhere in Millfield, Dave Morgan was learning that redemption was possible one act of service at a time. He went back inside to his daughter and her friends to the work of building something that mattered. The evening light slanted through the windows, illuminating the chaos of papers and computers and brilliant young minds at work. It was beautiful. The next morning arrived with an unexpected frost unseasonable for September, coating the windows of Jack's house with delicate crystals that reminded him of the morning Sarah had died, how the world had seemed frozen in that moment between before and after. But this morning was different. This morning, Mrs. Crowfeather's grandchildren were coming, and the garage was humming with new purpose. Jack arrived at the foundation early, finding Carlos already there with his 3 army buddies, Miguel Anthony and James Men, whose eyes carried the same weight Carlos's did when he'd first arrived, that particular combination of competence and searching that marked veterans trying to find their place in a civilian world that often didn't understand them. These are the vehicles, Miguel asked, running his hand along one of the mobile medical units with something approaching reverence. These save lives. Every day, Jack confirmed. That one runs dialysis to the reservation. This one here delivers meals to shut-ins. That refrigerated truck keeps the food bank supplied. Every vehicle matters because every person they serve matters. Anthony, the quietest of the group, spoke up. In Kandahar, we kept a whole forward operating base running with half the parts we needed and none of the time. This we can do. They were still going through orientation when a weathered pickup truck pulled into the lot. Mrs. Crowfeather emerged slowly, helped by a teenage boy, while two younger children, a girl about 10 and a boy who couldn't have been more than 7, jumped out of the back. "Mr. Miller," Mrs. Crowfeather said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived more than most people could imagine. "These are my grandchildren, Joseph, Mary, and little Thomas. They have something for you." Little Thomas, shy but determined, stepped forward, carrying a wooden box that was clearly heavy for his small arms. Inside, Jack found a hand-carved socket wrench handle, the wood worn smooth with intricate Native American patterns etched along its length. "My grandfather made tools," Mrs. Crowfeather explained. "Before the machines, before everything changed. This was his. The children wanted you to have it because you understand that tools aren't just metal and wood. They're lifelines." Jack's throat tightened as he accepted the gift, feeling the weight of history in the worn wood. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep the trucks running," Joseph the teenager said with quiet intensity. "Grandma needs that dialysis. Without it." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. "You have my word," Jack said, meeting the boy's eyes. "Every week, without fail." Mary, the 10-year-old, tugged on Jack's sleeve. "Mister, my teacher says you're teaching kids to fix cars. Can girls learn too?" Emily, who had been quietly watching from the office doorway, stepped forward. "Girls can learn anything boys can. I'm helping design the computer system that tracks all these vehicles. Want to see?" As Emily led Mary away, chattering about algorithms and predictive maintenance, Jack saw Sarah in every gesture his daughter made, every encouragement she offered. Mrs. Crowfeather saw it too. "Your daughter has her mother's spirit," the elderly woman said. "I knew Sarah. She taught at the reservation school one summer volunteer work. Changed lives, that one." Jack hadn't known that another piece of Sarah's life revealing itself like hidden treasure. Before he could respond, his phone rang urgently. It was Sandra from dispatch. "Jack, we have an emergency. The senior center transport has broken down with 15 elderly passengers aboard, including 2 in wheelchairs. They're on Route 15 and there's a storm coming in fast." Jack was already moving, calling out rapid instructions. "Carlos, you and Miguel take the backup van. Anthony and James prep the mobile maintenance unit. Dave..." He paused, seeing Dave Morgan arriving for his first official day. "Dave, you're with me." The caravan moved out quickly, Jack's truck leading the way. The storm Sandra had mentioned was already darkening the western sky, and the wind was picking up, sending tumbleweeds skittering across the highway. They found the senior center van tilted at an alarming angle on the shoulder. Its right rear tire completely shredded the spare, already flat from dry rot, another casualty of deferred maintenance from before Jack's time. "We need to get them transferred fast," Jack said, assessing the situation. The elderly passengers were clearly frightened, some struggling with the cold despite blankets. "The wheelchairs won't fit in the backup van with all the passengers," Carlos pointed out. Jack's mind raced through options. "Dave, can you and James get that tire changed with the patch kit? Carlos, start transferring the most fragile passengers. Anthony, help me reconfigure the backup van's interior." They worked with desperate efficiency as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Jack found himself lifting Mrs. Patterson, 93 years old, and trembling into the backup van, her thin hands gripping his arms. "You're Sarah Miller's husband," she said suddenly. "She read to me when I was in the hospital. Every Tuesday." Another revelation, another facet of his wife's quiet service revealed in this moment of crisis. "Yes, ma'am. Now let's get you warm and safe." The storm hit in full force just as they got the last passenger secured. The rain came sideways, driven by wind that rocked the vehicles. Dave, soaked to the skin, gave Jack a thumbs up. The tire was patched temporary but functional. "I'll drive the original van back," Dave shouted over the storm. "Test the repair." "That's risky." "I've got this, Jack. Get those people to safety." It was a 2-vehicle convoy back to the senior center, Jack leading in the repaired van, while Carlos followed with the packed backup vehicle. The storm raged around them, visibility dropping to mere yards, but they pressed on, knowing that the elderly passengers needed to get to safety and warmth. They arrived to find the senior center director, Patricia Webb, waiting with hot coffee and blankets, tears of relief on her face. "I thought we'd lost them," she said to Jack. "Mr. Morrison has a heart condition. Mrs. Patterson just got out of the hospital. If they'd been stuck out there. But they weren't, Jack said firmly. And we're going to make sure this never happens again. Every vehicle gets new spare tires, emergency kits, and satellite phones. No one gets stranded on my watch. As they helped the last of the seniors inside, Mr. Morrison, whose heart condition Patricia had mentioned, gripped Jack's hand with surprising strength. Young man, I knew your father, served with him in Vietnam. He'd be proud of what you did today. Not just the rescue that's heroics, but the system you're building that's legacy. That evening, the storm having passed, Jack stood in the garage reviewing the day's events with his expanded team. Every vehicle had been checked and double-checked. The new protocols were in place. But more than that, something had shifted. The veterans had found their mission. Dave had proved his commitment, and the community had seen once again that the Reynolds Foundation's fleet was more than just vehicles, it was a promise kept. Catherine Reynolds appeared as she often did at crucial moments, moving through the garage with obvious satisfaction. 15 seniors safe, she said simply. Because you built a team that responds to crisis with competence and compassion. This is what I envisioned when I hired you, Jack, but you've exceeded even my expectations. We got lucky today, Jack said honestly. That storm could have been worse. The tire could have blown at highway speed. Luck is preparation meeting opportunity, Catherine countered. You were prepared because you care. Your team responded because you've given them purpose. That's not luck. That's leadership. She pulled out a folder, handing it to Jack. The board met this afternoon. Emergency session. They've approved the full expansion 5 mobile maintenance units, the apprenticeship program with Father Martinez's youth, and something else. She smiled. The Emily Miller STEM Scholarship. Full ride to any state college for 1 student per year from the program selected based on innovation in community service. Jack stared at the papers, seeing Emily's name formalized into something permanent, something that would outlast them all. Catherine, I don't know what to say. Say you'll tell Emily yourself. She's earned it with that fleet management system. We're already getting inquiries from other foundations wanting to license it. Jack found Emily at home, surrounded by her study group, the dining table covered with laptops and circuit boards. Apparently, the fleet management app had evolved into a hardware component as well. Dad, Emily called out. Sophia figured out how to add diagnostic sensors that can predict engine failure 3 days in advance. That's amazing, kiddo. Can I talk to you for a minute? They stepped onto the porch, the evening air crisp after the storm, the sky washed clean and brilliant with stars. The foundation is creating a scholarship, Jack said carefully, for STEM students who show innovation in community service. They're naming it after you. Emily's eyes widened, then filled with tears. After me, but I'm nobody special. You're wrong, Jack said, pulling his daughter close. You're Sarah Miller's daughter. You're the kid who saw connections where others saw isolation. You're the girl who's changing how foundations across the state will maintain their vehicles. You're special because you use your gifts to help others. Like Mom did, Emily whispered. Exactly like Mom did. They stood there for a moment, father and daughter, looking at the stars Sarah had once taught Emily to name. Then Emily spoke again, her voice stronger. Dad, I want the first scholarship to go to Mary Crowfeather. Joseph told me she's brilliant at math, but thinks she can't be an engineer because no one in her family has ever gone to college. Jack smiled, seeing Sarah's compassion living on in their daughter. I think that can be arranged. The next morning brought a new challenge. 3 of the foundation's food bank trucks had been vandalized overnight, their tires slashed, windows broken. Jack arrived to find the police already there, Catherine Reynolds speaking with the chief. Gang initiation, the chief was saying. We've had a rash of them lately. Kids trying to prove themselves by causing damage. Jack surveyed the damage, calculating repair time, thinking of the food deliveries that wouldn't happen to families that would go hungry. Then he noticed something, a young man, maybe 17, watching from across the street, his face a mix of guilt and fear. I'll handle the repairs, Jack told Catherine, but his eyes stayed on the youth. Give me a few hours. As the police left, Jack walked across the street. The young man tensed to run, but something in Jack's expression stopped him. You know who did this, Jack said. It wasn't a question. The kid, because that's what he was, really just a kid, nodded slowly. I can't tell you. They'll kill me. What's your name? Deshaun. Deshaun, those trucks feed about 300 families a week. Some of them have kids who won't eat today because of this. That's sit right with you. Deshaun's face crumpled. I tried to stop them, said we should hit something else, something that didn't matter. But Marcus, he said, he stopped realizing he'd said a name. Marcus Washington. Jack knew the name, a kid who'd dropped out of school, been in and out of juvenile detention. His mom comes to the food bank every week, doesn't she? Deshaun's eyes widened. How did you... Because I pay attention. Those trucks you hit, one of them was scheduled to deliver to the neighborhood where Marcus's mom lives. He just hurt his own family. The weight of that settled on Deshaun's shoulders like a physical burden. Can you fix them? The trucks. I can. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to come work for me. Not paid, not at first. You're going to help repair every bit of damage. You're going to ride along on the deliveries and see who these trucks serve. And then you're going to convince Marcus and the others to do the same. They won't. They will if the alternative is prosecution. Mrs. Reynolds has excellent lawyers, and she's not feeling charitable about this. But I might be able to convince her to try something different, restorative justice instead of punishment. Deshaun stared at him. Why would you do that? Because everyone deserves a second chance. Because you're about the age my daughter will be in a few years, and I hope someone would do the same for her if she lost her way. And because those hands that slash tires could learn to change them instead. It took 3 days to get the program approved, 3 days during which Deshaun worked harder than he'd ever worked helping repair the damage. Jack watched him transform from sullen teenager to someone beginning to understand the weight of consequences. Marcus Washington was harder to convince, sitting across from Jack in a small room at the community center, his mother beside him with tears streaming down her face. You hurt your own people, she said to her son. Those trucks bring food to our neighborhood, to our neighbors, to us. I didn't know, Marcus mumbled, but Jack could see he had known, had just chosen not to think about it. Here's the deal, Jack said. 6 months working with me. You learn mechanics, you help with deliveries, you see what these vehicles mean to the community. You complete the program, and Mrs. Reynolds doesn't press charges. You fail, and you face the consequences. Why should I trust you? Marcus asked, defiance flickering in his eyes. Because I got fired for helping someone, Jack said simply. Lost everything. And the woman I helped gave me a second chance. Now I'm offering you the same. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it. Father Martinez's youth program launched the following Monday with 5 kids. Deshaun Marcus, 2 others from their group, and surprisingly Joseph Crow Feather, who wanted to learn to maintain the vehicle that kept his grandmother alive. Jack stood before them in the garage, Dave Morgan beside him. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, Dave, who had fired Jack for doing right now helping train kids who had done wrong. This isn't going to be easy, Jack began. You're going to work harder than you've ever worked. You're going to see parts of your community you've ignored. You're going to understand that every bolt you turn, every tire you change affects real people. Some of you are here because you made mistakes. That ends now. In this garage we build. We don't destroy. The first week was rough. Marcus challenged everything Deshaun struggled with, the technical aspects, and the other boys seemed ready to quit every day. But Joseph Crow Feather became an unexpected leader, his quiet competence and clear purpose keeping his grandmother's dialysis running, inspiring the others. Why do you care so much? Marcus asked him one day, watching Joseph meticulously check every connection on a medical unit. Because someone has to, Joseph replied. Because if this truck doesn't run, my grandmother dies. Because Mr. Miller saved her life, and now I need to learn to do the same. The breakthrough came during a ride-along delivery. Marcus was with Jack in a food bank truck complaining about the early morning when they stopped at an apartment complex. A line of people was already waiting, and Marcus froze when he saw his elderly neighbor Mrs. Chen, not the same Mrs. Chen who was Emily's friend's mother, but another elderly woman who had watched him after school when he was young and his mother worked 3 jobs. Marcus, Mrs. Chen said, surprised. What are you doing here? He's helping deliver food, Jack said smoothly. Part of his training. Mrs. Chen's face lit up. Such a good boy. I always knew you'd amount to something. Marcus helped carry her groceries to her apartment, saw her empty refrigerator, the careful way she divided the food to make it last. When they got back to the truck, he was crying. She used to feed me, he said. When Mom couldn't afford food, Mrs. Chen would make extra and pretend she'd cooked too much. And I almost took this away from her. But you didn't, Jack said. You're here making sure she gets what she needs. That's what matters now. Meanwhile, Emily's STEM program was flourishing. The fleet management system had been fully implemented and maintenance issues had dropped by 60%. She and her team were now working on a nutrition tracking system for the food bank, making sure balanced meals reached those in need. One evening, Jack came home to find Emily teaching Mary Crow. Feather advanced coding, both girls so absorbed they didn't notice him. In the living room, Sophia and Carlos were working on homework. While Carlos's wife prepared dinner in the kitchen, their families had started spending more time together, bonds forming that transcended work. It's becoming something beautiful. Sarah's voice seemed to whisper, maybe just the wind through the window, maybe just Jack's memory, but it felt real nonetheless. His phone rang. Catherine Reynolds. Jack, I need you to come to my office. Bring Emily. They found Catherine with a group of serious-looking people in suits, documents spread across her conference table. Jack, Emily, meet the board of the Morrison Foundation from Wyoming. They've been watching what we've built here. They want to replicate it. A distinguished man in his 60s stood extending his hand. Robert Morrison, we have 40 vehicles serving rural Wyoming and we're failing our communities. Breakdowns, missed deliveries, elderly people going without medication. We need what you've created here. It's not just about maintenance, Jack said carefully. It's about community investment, second chances, seeing vehicles as lifelines rather than assets. We understand, Morrison replied. That's why we want to hire your team as consultants, set up our program, train our people. We're prepared to pay substantially for your expertise. Jack looked at Emily, who was practically vibrating with excitement. The app could help them immediately, she said. We could customize it for their routes, their specific needs. How many other foundations need this? Catherine asked Morrison. Every rural foundation in the western states. We've all been struggling with the same problems. Jack's model mixing veteran employment, youth training, community integration. It's revolutionary. That night, Jack sat with Emily at their kitchen table working through the implications. They could help dozens of foundations, hundreds of communities. The mechanic who'd been fired for abandoning his post was now being asked to transform fleet maintenance across multiple states. Mom would be amazed, Emily said softly. She always believed in ripples, Jack replied. One action spreading outward. She just never got to see how far they could go. The next morning, Jack stood in the garage looking at his team, Carlos and the veterans conducting morning inspection. Dave teaching the youth program kids about engine diagnostics, Deshaun and Marcus genuinely engaged in learning. 6 months ago, he'd been a small-town mechanic worried about making rent. Now he was building something that would outlast him. James Richardson appeared in the doorway. Jack, there's someone here to see you. A woman in her 40s stood in the parking lot beside an old, battered pickup truck. She looked exhausted, defeated, holding the hand of a young boy. Are you Mr. Miller? The one who helps people? I fix vehicles, ma'am. What do you need? She started crying. My husband died last month. Cancer. I've been trying to keep his landscaping business going, but the truck died yesterday. It's all we have. Without it, I can't work, can't feed my son. The shops all want $2,000 I don't have. Jack looked at the truck, then at the boy who couldn't have been more than 8, wearing clothes a size too small, trying to be brave for his mother. Deshaun Marcus, Jack called. Got your first solo job. Let's see what you've learned. The 2 boys who had once destroyed vehicles now approached this one with careful respect. They diagnosed the problem, blown head gasket, same issue Jack had faced with the ambulance months ago, and set to work under Jack's supervision. We can fix it, Deshaun announced after an hour. Parts will cost about $300, but we can fix it. The woman started crying harder. I don't have $300. I don't have anything. Jack thought of Sarah, of second chances, of ripples spreading outward. The foundation has an emergency fund for situations like this. We'll cover the parts. The boys need the practice anyway. As Deshawn and Marcus worked, the woman's son watched with fascination. Can I learn to do that? He asked Jack. When you're older, sure. But you know what you can do now. You can learn. Stay in school, work hard, be ready when your chance comes. The repair took all day. Deshawn and Marcus working with an intensity that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. When the truck finally started running smooth, the woman hugged both boys, tears streaming down her face. You saved us, she said. You literally saved us. Marcus stood a little taller. We just fixed a truck. No, Jack corrected. You gave a family their future back. That's what we do here. That's what it means to serve your community. As the woman drove away, her son waving from the window, Catherine Reynolds emerged from the building. She'd been watching the whole time. This is why I hired you, she said to Jack. Not just to fix vehicles, but to fix lives. To build something that matters. That evening, there was a celebration at the community center. The foundation was officially launching the Miller Model, the comprehensive program Jack had developed as a template for other organizations. Jack stood at the podium uncomfortable in his borrowed suit, looking out at a crowd that included everyone whose life had intersected with his work. Mrs. Crow Feather was there with her grandchildren. Deshawn's mother sat with Marcus's, both women crying with pride. The veterans stood together in the back, still more comfortable observing than participating. Dave Morgan sat with Father Martinez, Redemption and Faith side by side. And in the front row, Emily beamed with pride wearing the dress Sarah had bought her for special occasions, now a little short but still perfect. 6 months ago, Jack began, his voice steady despite his nerves. I made a choice at an intersection. It cost me my job but saved a life. What I didn't know was that it would lead to this, to all of you, to this community of people committed to serving others. He talked about the program, the statistics, the vehicles saved, and lives changed. But then he set aside his prepared remarks. My wife Sarah used to say that we're all connected, that every action creates ripples we can't imagine. She died before she could see this, but she would have understood it immediately. Every vehicle we repair carries someone's hope. Every young person we train carries the future. Every second chance we offer carries the possibility of redemption. He looked at Emily, his voice thickening. Sarah believed in service. She believed in community. She believed that ordinary people could do extraordinary things if they just cared enough to try. Every day in this garage, we prove her right. The applause was thunderous, but Jack barely heard it. He was thinking of Sarah, of the morning he'd chosen to run toward that ambulance, of all the moments that had led to this one. After the celebration, as people slowly filtered out, Jack found himself standing with Emily outside the community center. The stars were brilliant in the clear Montana sky, and somewhere in the distance an ambulance siren wailed someone else racing to save a life. You did it, Dad, Emily said softly. You built something amazing. We did it, Jack corrected, all of us together. A car pulled up and Catherine Reynolds' driver opened the door for her. She walked over slowly, her recovery from the heart attack still requiring careful movement. Jack, there's something I need to tell you, she said. I'm announcing tomorrow that the foundation will be funding 10 Miller Model programs across 3 states. You'll oversee all of them. It means travel, more responsibility, but also more impact. Jack thought of the small garage he'd started in the 20 years at Dave's shop, the simple life he'd once thought was enough. That's a big change. Yes, it is. But you're ready for it. More importantly, the communities we serve need it. As Catherine's car pulled away, Emily took Jack's hand. Mom would be so proud, Dad. You took the worst day and turned it into something beautiful. Jack stood in the empty garage at 4 a.m, 3 weeks after Catherine's announcement, surrounded by boxes and planning documents that would reshape not just his life, but the lives of countless others across 3 states. The familiar smell of motor oil mixed with fresh coffee as he studied the map spread across his workbench. Red pins marking the 10 locations where new Miller Model programs would launch. Cheyenne, Billings, Spokane, Boise, each pin represented hundreds of vehicles, thousands of people who depended on them, and a responsibility that sometimes kept him awake at night. Couldn't sleep either. Dave Morgan's voice came from the doorway. The older man had taken to arriving early, as if trying to make up for lost time for all the years he'd prioritized profit over purpose. Just thinking, Jack replied, not looking up from the map. Each of these locations needs the right person to run it, someone who understands it's not just about fixing engines. Dave moved closer, studying the map. You know, 20 years ago, your father stood right here looking at a similar map. Only he was planning service routes for local farms, smaller scale, but the same heart. You knew my father well. Better than I admitted when I bought this place, Dave said quietly. He trained me, actually, my first job out of high school. He taught me everything about engines, but I was too young and stupid to learn what he tried to teach me about people. The confession hung between them in the pre-dawn quiet. Jack had learned more about Dave in the past months than in all their years working together, how his own father had been harsh and demanding measuring worth, only in dollars earned, how Dave had sworn to be successful in the only way he'd been taught to recognize. He would have fired me too, Jack said finally. If I'd abandoned the shop during work hours when he was struggling to make payroll. The difference is he would have shown up at my house that night with a six-pack and a plan to make it right. Yeah, Dave agreed. He would have. Tom Miller never let principle get in the way of people. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Carlos and his team, the veterans who had become the backbone of the operation. Miguel was reading from his phone, his face troubled. What is it? Carlos asked. My cousin in Cheyenne. Remember I told him about our program? He says there's a situation there. The food bank's main refrigerated truck has been down for 2 weeks. They're losing thousands of pounds of food daily. No one can fix it. Jack walked over, decision already forming. How far is Cheyenne? 6 hours if we push it, Anthony calculated. But Jack, we can't just... We can and we will. Jack interrupted. This is exactly why we're expanding. Carlos prepped the mobile unit. Dave, you're running things here today. Miguel, call your cousin and tell him we're coming. Emily appeared in the doorway, backpack in hand for school. Dad, I heard you talking about Cheyenne. That's one of our expansion sites, right? It is, kiddo. Then you should take the diagnostic tablet, the one Sophia and I modified. It can run remote analysis and teach their local mechanics what's wrong. Jack hugged his daughter, constantly amazed by her practical brilliance. What would I do without you? Probably still be using paper maintenance logs, she said with Sarah's smile. Be careful, Dad. And remember, this isn't just about fixing one truck. It's about showing them what's possible. The drive to Cheyenne was long but purposeful. Jack drove the mobile maintenance unit while Carlos followed in a supply truck. They talked through headsets, planning not just the immediate repair, but how to use this crisis as a teaching opportunity. This is how it starts, Carlos said. One emergency, one rescue, then they see what proper maintenance means. They arrived to find chaos at the Cheyenne Community Food Bank. Volunteers were frantically trying to save what they could, transferring food to smaller, inadequate coolers. The director, a woman named Patricia Hayes, looked ready to collapse from stress. You're the team from Montana. She grabbed Jack's hand like a lifeline. Please, we're losing everything. 300 families depend on us, and we're failing them. Jack was already moving toward the broken truck, Emily's diagnostic tablet in hand. The vehicle was newer than most of their fleet, but had been serviced by people who didn't understand the unique demands of constant stop-and-start delivery routes. Compressor shot, Jack announced after 10 minutes. But the real problem is systematic. Look here, wrong oil grade for this climate filters that haven't been changed in months, coolant system that's never been properly serviced. Can you fix it? Patricia asked desperately. We can do better than that. We can make sure it never happens again. Carlos started on the compressor. I'm going to gather their maintenance staff. What Jack found was depressing, but not surprising. The food bank's maintenance staff was one part-time mechanic named Earl, 70 years old, and clearly overwhelmed, and a collection of volunteers with good intentions but no training. I've been trying, Earl said, his voice defensive but tired. But I learned on engines from the 60s. These new computerized systems, I don't understand them. Then we'll teach you, Jack said simply. All of you. While we fix this truck, you're going to learn. And when we leave, you'll know how to prevent this from happening again. For the next 8 hours, Jack and Carlos didn't just repair, they taught. Every volunteer who was interested gathered around as they worked. Jack explaining each step, showing them how to read the diagnostic codes, how to perform preventive maintenance, how to spot problems before they became crises. Deshawn and Marcus had made the trip too eager to test their skills in a real emergency. Watching them work alongside Carlos, competent and confident, Jack felt a pride that rivaled anything he'd felt in 20 years of mechanics. 6 months ago, these boys were slashing tires, he told Patricia during a break. Now look at them. That's redemption, Patricia said softly. That's what we're supposed to be about, isn't it? Not just feeding bodies, but nurturing souls. By evening, the truck was running better than it had in years. But more importantly, Earl and 3 volunteers had successfully diagnosed and repaired a minor issue on another vehicle under Jack's supervision. I haven't felt this useful in years, Earl said, his eyes bright with renewed purpose. I thought I was too old to learn new tricks. You're never too old to grow, Jack replied. The Foundation is funding a full program here. Would you consider being part of it? Teaching what you know while learning what you don't. Earl's yes was immediate and emotional. The drive back to Montana was quiet, at first each of them processing the day. Then Marcus spoke from the back seat, his voice thoughtful. Mr. Miller, what we did today, that's 300 families who won't go hungry. That's kids who'll eat dinner tonight because we fixed a truck. That's right, Jack confirmed. I used to think power meant taking things, breaking things, making people afraid, Marcus continued. But real power is this, isn't it? Making things work, keeping promises, building instead of breaking. Deshawn added, My mom cried when I told her I was coming on this trip. Happy tears. Said I was becoming the man she always knew I could be. Jack caught Carlos's eye in the rearview mirror, both of them recognizing the transformation happening in real time. These weren't the same angry lost boys who'd vandalized trucks just months ago. They were becoming something more. Back in Millfield, they returned to find the garage buzzing with activity. Catherine Reynolds was there along with several people in business suits who looked important and impatient. Jack, perfect timing, Catherine said. These are representatives from the Morrison, Hartley, and Chen Foundations. They've come to see your operation firsthand. For the next 2 hours, Jack gave a tour that was more than just showing off facilities. He introduced them to each team member, let them hear Deshawn explain the diagnostic process he'd just used in Cheyenne, had Emily demonstrate the fleet management system, watched Dave Morgan honestly discuss his own journey from adversary to advocate. This is remarkable, said William Chen, whose foundation served the Pacific Northwest. But can it really be replicated? The human element seems so specific to your personal story. Jack thought carefully before answering. Every community has people like Deshawn and Marcus, young people who've made mistakes but deserve second chances. Every community has veterans like Carlos and his team, skilled people looking for missions that matter. Every community has Dave Morgan's people who've prioritized the wrong things but can still choose differently. The model works because it recognizes that fixing vehicles and fixing lives aren't separate missions. They're the same mission. William Chen exchanged glances with his colleagues. We're prepared to commit $5 million to expansion, but we need assurance that you personally will oversee the implementation. That means you'll be traveling a lot, Catherine warned Jack quietly. Emily has an entire community here, Jack interrupted, looking at his daughter, who was showing the Morrison Foundation representative her latest app updates. She has Mrs. Chen and her family Carlos and Sophia, Father Martinez, all the people who've become our extended family. And she's strong enough to handle this. She's Sarah's daughter. The contracts were signed that evening in a ceremony that felt both momentous and intimate. The garage where Jack had spent countless hours was transformed with lights and tables, the whole community invited to witness the birth of something larger than any of them had imagined. Father Martinez offered a blessing, his words carrying across the gathered crowd. From one act of selfless service, a movement is born. From one man's choice to help a stranger, countless strangers will find help. This is how God works through ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Mrs. Crowfeather was there with her grandchildren, Joseph, now wearing a Reynolds Foundation maintenance uniform, having been hired as an apprentice. She approached Jack during the reception. My grandfather had a saying, she said, the river that gives water to others never runs dry. You've become that river, Mr. Miller, you and your daughter both. Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the contracts were tucked safely away, Jack sat with Emily on the hood of his old truck, looking at the stars. It was something they'd started doing after Sarah died, their way of feeling connected to her. Are you okay with this, kiddo? Me traveling being gone sometimes? Emily was quiet for a moment. Mom traveled for her volunteer work sometimes, remember? Teaching at the reservation, helping at the shelter in Billings. She said service sometimes requires sacrifice. You remember that? I remember everything about her, Emily said softly. And Dad, what you're building, it's like taking everything Mom believed in and making it real, tangible, fixable. She helped hearts. You fix the vehicles that help the hearts get where they need to go. Jack pulled his daughter close, thinking about how much she'd grown in the past months, how much they'd both grown. I have something for you, Emily said, pulling out a small wrapped package. I've been working on it with Sophia and the team. Inside was a custom-engraved multi-tool similar to Jack's grandfather's, but modernized. On one side was engraved Miller Mechanics Service above self, and on the other a quote from Sarah, "Every action creates ripples." The QR code on the handle, Emily explained, links to our complete training database. Every procedure, every lesson you've taught, every innovation the team has developed. So wherever you go, you carry all our knowledge with you. Jack turned the tool over in his hands, feeling the weight of legacy, his grandfather's, his father's, Sarah's, and now Emily's, all combined into something he could carry forward. The first major expansion trip came 2 weeks later, Spokane, Washington, where a foundation serving indigenous communities was struggling with a fleet held together by hope and wire. Jack took Deshaun and Marcus with him, wanting them to see how their skills could change lives beyond Millfield. The Spokane situation was worse than Cheyenne. Of their 30 vehicles, only 5 were truly operational. The rest were in various states of breakdown, some having been sitting idle for months. This is impossible, the Foundation Director James Littlefoot said despairingly. We serve 7 reservations. Without these vehicles, elders don't get medical care, children don't get to after-school programs, food doesn't reach the hungry. Nothing's impossible, Jack said, surveying the lot. Deshaun, Marcus, what do you see? The 2 young men walked through the vehicles with newfound authority, making notes identifying problems. Their transformation was complete. They'd gone from destroying to diagnosing, from taking apart to putting together. We can get 20 operational within a week, Deshaun announced. The other 10 need major parts, but if we cannibalize 3 for components, we can save 7. James Littlefoot stared at these young men, barely out of their teens, speaking with such confidence about his foundation's lifeline. Who are you people? We're mechanics, Marcus said simply. But more than that, we're people who understand that every vehicle matters because every person matters. They worked 18-hour days in Spokane, not just repairing, but teaching, not just fixing, but transforming. Jack established a training program with local veterans, set up a youth apprenticeship with the tribal council, created systems that would outlast his presence. On the 4th night, exhausted and covered in grease, the 3 of them sat in a small diner near the foundation. An elderly Native American man at the next table had been watching them. You're the ones fixing the buses, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir, Jack replied. My granddaughter has diabetes. That medical van you fixed today, it brings her insulin every week. Without it, he stopped, emotion overwhelming him. Thank you. After the man left, Marcus stared at his half-eaten burger. I've never been thanked like that, like what I did mattered to someone's life. Get used to it, Jack said. This is what purpose feels like. They returned to Montana to find the program had grown in their absence. Father Martinez had recruited 10 more youth for training. Carlos's veteran network had produced 5 qualified mechanics looking for work. The Morrison Foundation had sent their entire fleet management team for training. But it was Emily's development that amazed Jack most. She'd established a youth council for the STEM program, was teaching coding to reservation children via video link, and had started what she called the Sarah Miller Memorial Garden at the foundation, a space where families waiting for services could find peace. She's becoming a leader, Catherine Reynolds told Jack one afternoon, watching Emily coordinate a team of peers working on the latest app updates. Just like her mother, just like you, but in her own unique way. That evening, as Jack prepared for his next trip, Boise this time, Emily helped him pack. She'd created a detailed checklist, organized his tools, even prepared briefing documents on the Boise Foundation's specific challenges. "You're 12 years old," Jack said, amazed. "When did you become my logistics coordinator?" "When you started changing the world," Emily replied matter-of-factly. "Someone has to keep you organized while you do it." The Boise trip revealed new challenges. The foundation there served migrant farm workers, and their vehicles needed to be mobile service centers providing everything from medical care to legal aid to education. The complexity was staggering. "We need vehicles that can transform," the director Maria Santos explained. "Medical clinic in the morning, classroom in the afternoon, legal aid office in the evening." Jack studied the problem, then called Emily. "Remember that modular design you were sketching last week? The transformable interior system, Dad, that was just an idea. It's exactly what we need. Can you work with the team to develop it fully?" Within days, Emily and her STEM team had created designs for modular vehicle interiors that could be reconfigured in minutes. The Boise Foundation became the pilot program, and within a month their service capacity had doubled without adding a single vehicle. The success stories multiplied. In Billings, they established a program that employed former prisoners as mechanics, giving them skills and hope. In Coeur d'Alene, they created a mobile maintenance unit that served rural communities, bringing repair services to vehicles that couldn't make it to shops. But success brought new challenges. Jack was away from home more often, missing Emily's school events, returning exhausted from weeks on the road. One night, he came home to find Emily asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by homework and a half-eaten dinner. A note in her handwriting read, "Dad, Mrs. Chen invited me for dinner, but I wanted to wait for you. There's pasta in the fridge. Love you." Jack sat beside his sleeping daughter, guilt washing over him. He was changing lives across 3 states, but was he failing the one life that mattered most? "You're not failing her." Sarah's voice seemed to whisper, "Maybe just the wind, maybe just memory. You're showing her what service looks like. You're teaching her that love isn't just words, it's action, even when that action takes you away." Emily stirred, opening her eyes. "Dad, you're home." "I'm home, kiddo. I'm sorry I'm late." "It's okay. Mrs. Crowfeather's granddaughter Mary got her scholarship today. The Emily Miller STEM scholarship. She's going to be an engineer. That happened because you were away helping others. It's all connected, Dad." Jack hugged his daughter tight, understanding that she'd inherited not just Sarah's brilliance, but her wisdom, her ability to see the larger picture even in moments of personal sacrifice. The next morning brought unexpected news. Dave Morgan had suffered a heart attack. Jack rushed to the hospital, finding Dave conscious but pale-looking, older than his years. "Ironic, isn't it?" Dave said weakly. "You saved Catherine Reynolds when she had her heart attack, and that led to everything. Now here I am." "You're going to be fine," Jack assured him, though the doctors had been less certain. "Maybe, maybe not. But Jack, I need to tell you something. I've been putting money aside. Every paycheck from the foundation. I want to create a fund, the Second Chances Fund, for people like Deshaun and Marcus kids who need opportunity, not punishment. Dave, let me finish. I wasted decades chasing the wrong things. These last months working with those boys, seeing them transform, that's the only real success I've ever had. Promise me you'll make it happen." Jack promised, and Dave smiled, looking more at peace than Jack had ever seen him. Dave survived, but his working days were over. The Second Chances Fund was established with his savings and matched by the Reynolds Foundation. The first recipient was a young woman named Keisha who'd been caught stealing food for her younger siblings. Instead of prosecution, she entered the program and within months was one of the most skilled diagnostic technicians Jack had ever trained. The year anniversary of the ambulance incident approached, with Jack barely noticing, so busy was he with expansions and programs. But Emily noticed. She organized a celebration at the community center, inviting everyone whose life had been touched by that moment's decision. The crowd was enormous. Hundreds of people filled the space mechanics Jack had trained, youth who'd found purpose, families who'd received services from vehicles Jack's team had repaired. Mrs. Crowfeather was there, healthy, thanks to regular dialysis. The farm worker families from Boise sent a video message. The veterans from Spokane had driven down specially for the event. Catherine Reynolds took the stage, still strong despite her age and health challenges. 1 year ago, Jack Miller made a choice that should have ruined him. Instead, it transformed not just his life, but hundreds of lives across our region. Jack, would you come up here? Reluctantly, Jack joined her on stage, uncomfortable as always with recognition. Tell us, Catherine said, what have you learned this year? Jack looked at the crowd, seeing all the connections, all the ripples Sarah had always talked about. His eyes found Emily standing with her STEM team, brilliant and confident and kind. I learned that my wife was right, he said simply. Every action creates ripples. But I also learned that those ripples can become waves if enough people join together. Every person in this room is proof that community isn't just a word, it's a choice we make every day to help each other, to offer second chances, to build instead of break. He paused, emotion thick in his throat. A year ago, I was just a mechanic who ran toward an ambulance. Today, we're a movement that's transforming how foundations serve their communities. That's not my achievement, it's ours. Every repaired vehicle, every trained youth, every second chance offered, we did that together. The applause was thunderous, but Jack barely heard it. He was looking at Emily, who was crying and smiling simultaneously, so much like Sarah. In that moment, it took his breath away. After the celebration, as people slowly dispersed, Jack and Emily stood outside the community center, the same spot where they'd stood after his first Reynolds Foundation presentation. It's been a hell of a year, kiddo, Jack said. Mom would be so proud, Emily replied. Not just of what you've built, but of who you've become. Who we've become, Jack corrected. None of this happens without you. A car pulled up Catherine Reynolds again, but this time she wasn't alone. A young man in an expensive suit stood beside her, looking uncomfortable but determined. Jack, Catherine said, this is my grandson, William. He's been living in New York working on Wall Street. He's read about your program. William stepped forward, extending his hand. Mr. Miller, I want to learn. Not the business side, I know that. I want to learn mechanics. I want to understand how things actually work, how to fix things with my hands, not just spreadsheets. Jack studied the young man's soft hands that had never held a wrench, expensive shoes that would be ruined in a day, but something genuine in his eyes. It's hard work, Jack warned. No special treatment because you're Mrs. Reynolds' grandson. I wouldn't want any, William said firmly. I've spent 5 years making rich people richer. I want to do something that matters. Jack looked at Catherine, who smiled. Another ripple, she said simply. As they walked back to the truck, Emily asked, Are you really going to train a Wall Street banker to be a mechanic? Everyone deserves a chance to find their purpose, Jack replied. Even rich kids who've lost their way. Like Deshaun and Marcus, just from the other direction, Emily observed. Exactly. That night, Jack sat at his kitchen table updating the training manuals for the newest expansion sites. Emily worked beside him on her homework, the comfortable silence of shared purpose filling the space. Outside, Millfield slept peacefully, unaware that in this small house, a revolution in community service was being planned and refined. Jack's phone buzzed with messages from the various sites, successes, challenges, requests for guidance. Each message represented lives being changed, communities being served, promises being kept. Dad, Emily said suddenly, I've been thinking about Mom's ripples metaphor. I think she was wrong about one thing. Oh, she always talked about dropping a stone in water and watching the ripples spread. But what you've done, it's more like teaching other people to drop their own stones. The ripples aren't just spreading from one point. They're overlapping, reinforcing each other, creating patterns nobody could have predicted. Jack looked at his 12-year-old daughter, wise beyond her years, carrying forward Sarah's legacy in ways neither of them could have imagined. You're right, he said. It's not just ripples anymore. It's a wave of change. The wave of change Emily had described crashed into reality 6 months later. When William Reynolds, Catherine's grandson, stood in the garage at 5 a.m, his soft hands now calloused and scarred, rebuilding an engine with the focused intensity of someone who'd finally found their calling. Jack watched from the doorway, remembering the Wall Street banker who'd arrived in Italian leather shoes, now transformed into someone who understood that real value wasn't measured in stock prices, but in lives served. Compression's still off, and William muttered, not looking up from his work. The head gasket's warped. This whole engine needs rebuilding, not just patching. Good catch, Jack said, stepping into the garage. 6 months ago, you wouldn't have known a head gasket from a head of lettuce. William laughed, a sound that had become more common as the pretension of his former life had been stripped away layer by layer like old paint from metal. 6 months ago, I thought I was important because I moved millions of dollars with a keystroke. Now I know I'm important when Mrs. Chen's delivery van starts on a cold morning. The transformation hadn't been easy. William's first week had been brutal to Sean, and Marcus had shown no mercy, making him prove himself just as they'd had to. But something in William had responded to the challenge, perhaps the same something that had made his grandmother Catherine build a foundation instead of just inheriting wealth. Your grandmother's here, Jack said, nodding toward the office where Catherine Reynolds was reviewing expansion plans with Emily, who had become an unofficial strategic advisor despite being only 13 now. Already. William checked his watch, leaving a fresh grease mark on his face. The board meeting isn't until 9. This isn't about the board meeting, Jack said quietly. It's about something else, something bigger. They walked to the office together. William still wiping his hands on a rag, a gesture that had become second nature. Inside, Catherine sat with Emily, but they weren't alone. James Richardson was there, along with several people Jack didn't recognize, their suits suggesting significance. Jack William, Catherine began, her voice carrying the weight of momentous news. These are representatives from the Federal Transportation Authority and the Department of Health and Human Services. They've been observing our program for the past year. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back severely stood and extended her hand. Director Patricia Williams, Mr. Miller, what you've created here has caught national attention. We're here to discuss scaling it. Scaling it? Jack repeated, his mind already racing. Nationally, Director Williams confirmed. Every state has foundations struggling with fleet maintenance. Every state has veterans needing purpose, youth needing direction, communities needing reliable service delivery. The Miller model, as it's being called, could transform how America serves its most vulnerable populations. Jack sat down heavily, the weight of the possibility overwhelming. Emily reached over and squeezed his hand, a gesture so reminiscent of Sarah that it steadied him. We're talking about a federal program, Director Williams continued. Funding for 1,000 locations, training for 10,000 mechanics, service to millions of Americans. But we need you to lead it. I'm just a mechanic, Jack said automatically, the same response he'd given Catherine 2 years ago. No, Williams spoke up, surprising everyone. You're not just anything. I've watched you for 6 months. You see connections others miss. You understand that fixing machines and fixing lives aren't separate activities. You've taught me that real leadership isn't about commanding from above, it's about serving from below, lifting others up. Catherine smiled at her grandson's words. The board has already approved. The Reynolds Foundation will provide initial funding and infrastructure. But Jack, this decision is yours. Jack looked at Emily, seeking her wisdom despite her youth. She smiled Sarah's smile, but with her own steel beneath it. Dad, remember what you told me when Mom died, that we honor the dead by serving the living. This is that magnified 1,000 times. Before Jack could respond, his phone rang urgently. It was Carlos, who was managing the Spokane site. Jack, we have a situation. Massive wildfire evacuation orders for 3 reservations. Every vehicle is needed, but half are down for maintenance. We need everyone. Jack stood immediately, decision crystallizing. Director Williams, you want to see what we do? Come with us. Emily called the team. Everyone available, we're going to Spokane. William prepped the mobile units. Mr. Miller, Director Williams said, I'm here for a meeting, not... With respect, Director, you can't understand what we do from a conference room. You need to see it when it matters most, when lives hang in the balance. Within 2 hours, a convoy was heading north, 3 mobile maintenance units, 2 supply trucks and a van carrying Director Williams and her team, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as they left the world of policy papers for the reality of crisis response. The scene in Spokane was controlled chaos. The evacuation center was overwhelmed, vehicles lined up for emergency repairs, smoke thick in the air from the approaching fires. James Littlefoot met them with desperation in his eyes. We need 15 vehicles operational in the next 3 hours, or people will be left behind. Elderly, disabled families with small children, they're all counting on us. Jack didn't waste time on speeches. Deshaun, Marcus, take the medical units. William, you're with Carlos on the transport vans. Emily set up the coordination center. Director Williams, you're with me. For the next 3 hours, Director Williams watched a symphony of service. She saw Deshaun once a vandal diagnose and repair a complex electrical problem in minutes. She saw Marcus teaching a local volunteer how to change brake pads while simultaneously fixing a transmission. She saw William, the former banker covered in oil and dirt, bringing a dead engine back to life with determination that bordered on desperation. But mostly, she saw Jack moving between vehicles, teaching, fixing, coordinating, never raising his voice, but somehow keeping everyone focused and motivated. When an elderly Native American woman approached crying because her wheelchair-modified van wouldn't start and her disabled grandson was still at their home near the fire line, Jack dropped everything. "We'll get him," he promised, personally taking on the van's repair while sending Carlos with another vehicle to retrieve the grandson. Director Williams helped where she could, holding tools, following instructions, her expensive suit ruined within minutes. When Jack had to slide under the van, she found herself holding a flashlight, illuminating his work. "This is it, isn't it?" she said quietly. "This is what we've lost in bureaucracy and policy, the direct connection between service and served." "Every bolt we turn affects a real person," Jack replied from under the van. "Every minute we save could be someone's life." The van started just as Carlos radioed that he'd retrieved the grandson. The elderly woman cried, hugging Jack with strength that belied her age. Director Williams watched this interaction, saw how Jack knew the woman's name, asked about her health, promised to check on her van regularly. "You know them all, don't you?" Williams asked. "They're not statistics," Jack replied. "They're people. Mrs. Yazzie there has been caring for her grandson alone since his parents died in a car accident. If her van fails, he doesn't get to his therapy. Without therapy, he doesn't walk. Every vehicle tells a story." By evening, all essential vehicles were operational. The evacuations proceeded smoothly. Hundreds of people moved to safety. The evacuation center had become a makeshift community, with Emily coordinating food distribution through her app. William helping families load belongings, Deshaun and Marcus still working on vehicles that would be needed in the coming days. Director Williams stood with Jack watching the organized chaos. "I came here thinking I understood your program. I had chart statistics, cost-benefit analyses, but this is something else entirely. This is community," Jack said simply. "This is what happens when you stop seeing problems as separate issues and start seeing them as connected challenges. That elderly woman's van breaks down, her grandson misses therapy. He doesn't improve, she becomes depressed, their whole family structure collapses. Fix the van, you prevent all of that." "The federal program," Williams said slowly, "it can't just be about maintenance." "No," Jack agreed. "It has to be about connection, about second chances, about recognizing that everyone from Wall Street bankers to street kids has something to contribute if given the opportunity." That night they slept in the evacuation center, Jack and his team among the evacuees. Director Williams, despite being offered a hotel room, stayed too sleeping on a cot like everyone else. She woke at 3 a.m. to find Jack already up working on evacuation vehicles by floodlight, preparing for the next day's needs. "Don't you sleep?" she asked. "Not much during emergencies," Jack admitted. "My wife used to say I was solar-powered, charging up during quiet times to burn bright during crises." "Tell me about her." "Sarah." Jack's hands never stopped working as he talked. "She was a teacher, but that doesn't capture it. She taught kids to see beyond their circumstances. She'd take inner-city students to the mountains, reservation kids to universities, wealthy kids to homeless shelters. She believed in expanding horizons. Like you do with mechanics. I just fix vehicles. Sarah fixed souls." "I think you do both," Williams said quietly. "I've decided. The federal program will happen, but only if you lead it. Not from Washington, from here, from the ground, from the communities you serve." Jack was quiet for a long moment, hands still working. "I need to talk to Emily." He found his daughter asleep in the coordination center, her laptop still open, showing distribution routes she'd been optimizing. At 13, she was managing logistics that would challenge adults. Jack gently woke her. "Hey kiddo, take a walk with me." They stepped outside where the air still smelled of smoke, but the immediate danger had passed. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten with pre-dawn glow. "Director Williams wants me to lead a national program," Jack said without preamble. "It would mean more travel, more responsibility. It would change everything." Emily was quiet, considering. "Mom used to say that gifts came with obligations, that if you could help, you should help. You have a gift, Dad, not just for fixing engines, but for fixing broken systems, broken lives." "But the cost—" "I'm 13, not 3, Emily interrupted. "I have our family here, Mrs. Chen, Carlos, and Sophia, the whole community. And Dad, think about it. Every state, thousands of kids like Deshaun and Marcus getting second chances. Thousands of veterans like Carlos finding purpose. Thousands of Williams learning what real value means. When did you become so wise?" "I had good teachers. You and Mom both." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold despite the lingering smoke. Then Emily spoke again. "There's something else. I've been accepted to the Advanced STEM program at the State University. It's a residential program for gifted students. I'd live on campus during the week, come home weekends." Jack's chest tightened. "When did—" "Last week. I was waiting for the right time to tell you. The thing is, Dad, we're both ready for bigger things. You've taught me to be strong, to be independent, to serve others. Let me use those lessons while you change the world." Back in Millfield 2 days later, after the last evacuee had been returned home and the crisis had passed, Jack stood before a gathering that had become too large for the community center. They'd moved to the high school gymnasium, where hundreds of people connected to the program had assembled. Catherine Reynolds opened the meeting, her voice still strong despite her advancing age. "2 years ago, a mechanic saved my life at an intersection. Today, we're announcing that his model of community service will become a national program." Jack took the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. Deshaun and Marcus in the front row wearing their instructor badges, now teaching others what they'd learned. Carlos and his veteran team, who'd become the backbone of operations across 3 states. Dave Morgan recovered from his heart attack, but still fragile pride evident in his eyes. William Reynolds, no longer the soft banker, but a capable mechanic who'd found his purpose. And Emily, brilliant Emily, recording everything for the training materials she was developing. "When I ran to that ambulance," Jack began, "I thought I was just fixing an engine. I had no idea I was stepping into a river of connection that would carry us all to places we never imagined. Each of you has become part of something larger than ourselves, a recognition that service isn't a job, it's a calling." He paused, seeing Sarah in his mind's eye, hearing her voice talking about ripples and connections, and the power of single actions to change everything. "The federal program will launch with 50 sites in the first year, 500 by year 3. We'll train veterans, youth, anyone who needs purpose and direction. We'll maintain vehicles that serve millions of Americans, elderly, disabled, poor, forgotten. But more than that, we'll build communities that understand a fundamental truth: we rise or fall together." The applause was thunderous, but Jack raised his hand for quiet. "This success belongs to all of us, but I need to acknowledge some people. Deshaun and Marcus, who proved that redemption is always possible. Carlos and his team, who showed that military service prepares you for civilian service. Dave Morgan, who demonstrated that it's never too late to choose differently. William Reynolds, who learned that real wealth is measured in service, not dollars." He paused, his voice thickening. "My daughter Emily, who carries her mother's wisdom and has become the heart of our innovation. And Catherine Reynolds, who gave a fired mechanic a chance to build something meaningful." Catherine stood slowly, William helping her. "Jack, there's one more announcement. The board has decided to rename the program. It will be officially known as the Sarah Miller National Service Initiative. Because while you built the structure, Jack, you built it on the foundation of her beliefs that everyone deserves dignity, that service is love in action, that small acts can have enormous consequences." Jack couldn't speak. Emily ran to him, hugging him fiercely as the gymnasium erupted in applause. Through his tears, he saw the photo of Sarah that someone had placed on the podium. Her teaching smile, the one that said everyone could learn, everyone could grow, everyone mattered. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Jack traveled constantly, setting up new sites, training directors, establishing the culture of service that was essential to the program's success. Emily thrived in her advanced program, coming home weekends with new ideas, new innovations, her mother's brilliance flowering in ways that amazed everyone. Deshawn was appointed to run the Millfield site with Marcus as his deputy. The Vandals had become the Guardians. Carlos took over the veteran recruitment program, traveling to military bases to find those ready for their next mission. William Reynolds, to everyone's surprise, requested assignment to the poorest district in Detroit, wanting to prove himself where the need was greatest. Dave Morgan, despite his health issues, became the program's historian, documenting every story, every transformation, creating training materials that captured not just the technical aspects, but the human elements that made the program work. One evening, a year into the national expansion, Jack returned home exhausted from a 2-week trip establishing sites in Appalachia. He found Emily in the garage working on an old motorcycle she'd bought with money earned from licensing her fleet management software. "Since when do you work on motorcycles?" he asked. "Since I realized I'm a miller," she said, looking up with grease-smudged cheeks. "We fix things. It's what we do." "That we do," Jack agreed, picking up a wrench to help. As they worked together, Emily talked about her week, her classes, her innovations. A boy named David who'd asked her to the school dance. "Did you say yes?" Jack asked, trying to sound casual. "I said I'd think about it. I've been pretty busy changing the world and all." Jack laughed. Really laughed for the first time in weeks. "Your mom would have loved that answer." "I know," Emily said softly. "I talk to her sometimes. Not like she's really there, but like she's in everything we do. Every vehicle we fix, every person we help, every second chance we offer. She's in all of it." Jack's phone buzzed with a message from Director Williams. "Congressional hearing next week. They want to hear from you about expanding the program internationally. Canada and Mexico are interested." He showed it to Emily, who whistled low. "International Dad, that's huge." "Too huge." "Nothing's too huge when you're doing the right thing for the right reasons," Emily said, channeling Sarah's wisdom once again. That night, Jack stood in his backyard looking at the stars Sarah had taught Emily to name. The weight of responsibility was enormous. Thousands of people depending on the program, millions served by it, a legacy that had grown beyond anything imaginable. But in the quiet of the Montana night, he heard Sarah's voice, maybe memory, maybe wishful thinking, maybe something more. "Every action creates ripples, Jack. You didn't just create ripples, you created waves. You created oceans of change." The congressional hearing was held in a packed chamber with representatives from every state wanting to understand how a fired mechanic from Montana was revolutionizing social services across America. Jack sat at the witness table, uncomfortable in his suit, but confident in his message. "Distinguished members of Congress," he began, 2.5 years ago, I made a decision that cost me my job but saved a life. That decision led to opportunities I never imagined, connections I never expected, and a movement that has transformed how we think about service. He told them about Deshawn and Marcus, their photos displayed on screens around the chamber, from vandals to instructors, from destroyers to builders. He told them about Carlos and the veterans finding purpose in service. He told them about William Reynolds leaving Wall Street to find meaning in Detroit's poorest neighborhoods. But most importantly, Jack said, "I want to tell you about the people we serve. Mrs. Crowfeather, who gets her dialysis because our vehicles run. The homeless families who get food because our refrigerated trucks work. The disabled children who get to therapy because our vans are reliable. Every statistic represents a human being whose life is better because someone cared enough to fix what was broken." A congressman from Texas asked, "Mr. Miller, your program costs significantly more than traditional maintenance contracts. How do you justify the expense?" Jack had been prepared for this. "Sir, with respect, you're measuring the wrong things. Yes, we spend more on training, on wages, on community integration. But we save exponentially more. Every young person who enters our program instead of prison saves the state hundreds of thousands of dollars. Every veteran who finds purpose with us doesn't become a suicide statistic. Every vehicle that doesn't break down means medical appointments kept, jobs retained, families fed. The cost isn't just justified, it's an investment in America's future." The congresswoman from California leaned forward. Mr. Miller, you speak eloquently for someone who claims to be just a mechanic. Ma'am, I am just a mechanic, but I've learned that fixing things, whether engines or lives, requires understanding how all the parts work together. A community is like an engine. If one part fails, the whole system suffers. Our program ensures no part is forgotten, no person is abandoned. The hearing went on for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The evidence was overwhelming the support bipartisan. The Sarah Miller National Service Initiative was approved for international expansion with funding that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. As Jack left the Capitol, his phone rang. It was Emily calling from Montana. Dad, I watched the whole thing online. You were amazing. I just told the truth, kiddo. That's what made it amazing. Hey, there's something else. Remember that boy David? The one who asked me to the dance? Yeah. He's organizing a fundraiser for the local program. Says he wants to be part of something that matters. I think I might say yes to that dance. Jack smiled, thinking of Sarah, of how she would have loved seeing Emily navigate teenage life while changing the world. Trust your instincts, sweetheart. They've been pretty good so far. Dad? Come home soon. The garage doesn't feel right without you. Soon, kiddo, I promise. But soon was relative. The international expansion required months of travel establishing programs in Toronto, Mexico City, Vancouver, Guadalajara. Each location brought new challenges, new opportunities, new lives to transform. In Mexico City, Jack worked with street children who lived in the subway system, teaching them mechanics while giving them hope. In Toronto, he established a program for Indigenous youth from remote communities bridging urban and rural divides. In every location, the same truth emerged. People needed purpose as much as they needed food, needed dignity as much as they needed shelter. Through it all, Emily grew into a remarkable young woman. At 15, she was co-directing the technological development of the entire program, her innovations saving millions while improving service delivery. She'd also started dating David, the boy who'd organized the fundraiser, finding in him someone who understood that service to others was the highest calling. One evening, Jack was in his hotel room in Seattle, exhausted from establishing another site, when Catherine Reynolds called. Her voice was weak, frailer than he'd ever heard it. Jack, I need you to come home. Not for the program. For me. He flew through the night, arriving to find Catherine in the hospital, the same one where they'd first met after he'd saved her life. She was dying, her body finally surrendering to age and the heart condition that had plagued her for years. I wanted to thank you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Not for saving my life that day, but for showing me what that life was worth, for proving that investment in people pays the highest dividends. Catherine, you gave me the chance. No, Jack, you created the chance. You took a moment of crisis and transformed it into a movement of hope. Promise me something. Anything. Don't let it become just another program. Keep it personal. Keep it connected. Keep it human. I promise. Catherine smiled, closing her eyes. Sarah would be so proud of you, of Emily, of everything you've built on the foundation of her beliefs. Catherine Reynolds died that night, surrounded by family and those whose lives she'd touched. The funeral was attended by thousands, a testament to a life well lived. But it was William who gave the most moving eulogy. My grandmother was born into wealth, he said, standing at the podium in his mechanic's uniform, not a suit. She could have lived a life of pure privilege. Instead, she chose service. But her greatest act of service might have been recognizing Jack Miller's potential, seeing in a fired mechanic the seeds of national transformation. He paused, looking directly at Jack. She used to say that wealth wasn't what you had, but what you did with what you had. Jack Miller had skills, compassion, and courage. He's done more with those than most do with millions. Grandmother saw that. She invested in that. And that investment has paid dividends that will ripple through generations. After the funeral, the Reynolds Foundation board met. They offered Jack the position of executive director, essentially Catherine's job. He declined. I'm a mechanic, he said simply. I belong in the garage with the vehicles, with the people. But Emily, He looked at his daughter, now 16, brilliant and compassionate in equal measure. Emily has her mother's vision and Catherine's strategic mind. Train her. In 2 years, when she's 18, she'll be ready to help lead this foundation into its next chapter. The board was skeptical until Emily presented her 5-year plan, a comprehensive vision that integrated artificial intelligence with human service that expanded the program to include renewable energy vehicle conversion that created pathways from service to ownership, allowing program graduates to eventually own their own shops. "This is remarkable," the board chair said. "You're 6 to 8. Age is just a number," Emily replied with Sarah's smile. "Impact is what matters." The program continued to grow. By year 4, it operated in every state, 200 Canadian locations, and 50 sites in Mexico. Deshawn had become a national trainer, traveling to share his story and expertise. Marcus had written a book about redemption through service, which became required reading in the program. Carlos led the Veteran Integration Initiative, having helped 5,000 veterans find purpose in civilian service.